Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to part 2 of Morning Break. We really hope you've enjoyed the show so far, and stay tuned because we still have lots to come.
Now it's time to introduce our guest. We have with us today Sister Masuma, who is a qualified hairdresser and worked in a high street salon. She's now a mobile hairdresser. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Masuma. Welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about how you got into hairdressing.
Well, I think it's always been an innate passion of mine since I was like 6. So I've always, like, as children do, like playing with your doll's hairs and things like that. But I had an excessive passion of it. And as I grew up, when anyone asked me when I was younger, I said, what do you want to be? I said, I definitely want to be a hairdresser. But I think the thing is that with the academics and things like that, I kind of went into the academic side of things more. I felt more stimulated by all that. So I went ahead, I did my degree, I worked as a marketing executive in London. And then after I got married, I realised that passion was still within me. And I said, if I don't do this, I will never know what it's really like. So alhamdulillah, with the support of my husband, I was able to go forward and qualify in this. And that's how I really got into it.
So you must find it a bit strange, you know, obviously being veiled and covered and working in a high street salon where absolutely anybody can walk in. Did you find that a bit of a challenge?
Personally, I think it's in the mind. I think if you see yourself as looking odd, then you will kind of reflect that on other people, and you will kind of, your body language will give off that signal, so they will kind of see you as a little bit odd as well. Whereas if you just totally are so natural in your own environment, it kind of rubs off on other people. And I find that it's to do with how you hold yourself, and if you're kind of oozing with confidence in what you're doing, that confidence is kind of filtered into other people, including your clients. So yes, it's a challenge if you have it in your head, but if you don't, there's no challenge.
And did you consciously choose to work in a mainstream high street salon, or because, you know, many people have the option, for example, to be a mobile hairdresser and just work from home or visit other people's houses? So what made you choose to actually work in a salon that's just based in a high street that's open to everyone?
Well, I think that the best way to bring out the best skills in yourself is to be in that environment where you have the most exposure. And you don't get that as much with mobile hairdressing. You have to build up your client base at first, and especially if you've just qualified or you're training, it's best to be in that environment where you're with other people that have more experience, you can learn from them, you've got guidance around you. And that's the main reason for working in the salon, which is what I did at the beginning. And it was fantastic, just the amount that you learn in one day, where you have a column of clients, like 5 or 6 clients. You learn something from each client. You can't really get that with mobile hairdressing. I mean, if you're running around in your car, you can't really fit in 6 people a day if you're going to different places in London. So it is a different environment altogether, and everything's local to you. Your products are just there. You can recommend your products. You can do this in your sales, all the same thing. And it's kind of it's that also that buzz of working with people in the same industry as you is totally different.
It sounds really exciting, actually. I really can see the passion coming through in your speech, even. I wanted to ask you, did you ever face challenges in terms of when you went to meet employers? So before you got employed with the salon, did they look at you funny and say, "Well, we can't even see your hair"? So, you know, or did your customers have reactions to you?
You know, before I went into this, I thought, could my hijab be a slight hindrance? Could it even be that? But then I took it out of my head, and the thing is, I was so shocked, and I'll be really positively honest there, because I have been for interviews, and I've actually been offered positions in really upmarket high street salons, which I've actually declined due to some challenges, which we can talk about later. But they've not even looked at my hijab. They've looked at my passion, and my wanting to develop in that area. And they've actually, you know, funnily enough, some high street chains that brand names, would tell me, you know what, if you really don't want to cut men's hair, we can't guarantee that you won't get a client in your column, but, you know, if you're busy enough with your ladies, that's okay. So for them to be that understanding, I was truly shocked. I didn't expect it, and I think that was kind of narrow-minded for me not to expect it. But going in there, I would tell anyone that people are very open-minded about it.
It's very refreshing to hear, actually.
Yeah, very open-minded.
I think that's interesting in the sense that I think often people assume that as a Muslim woman, and as a visible, I guess, Muslim woman who perhaps does try to adhere to the meaning of hijab, for example, often a lot of people will think that you'll face challenges. and that non-Muslims will be the ones to challenge you. But in actual fact, and I think women from lots of different kind of areas of work would say that people are very accommodating, you know, and that's not just to do with hijab, that's to do with wanting to pray on time or getting a room to pray. And I've found, just from my experience, I don't know whether you guys would agree, in generally, you know, in whatever area of work you're in, that people are very accommodating and almost, I think you have it all good in the sense that people will go out of their way to make sure that they're doing those kind of things for you, whereas you wouldn't necessarily get that, I guess, if you weren't Muslim, a Muslim woman in that kind of field.
I totally agree, because I find that in life, if you don't ask and if you don't explore, you won't know what's out there. So you've got to really kind of push yourself and not keep your assumptions to yourself and be closed-minded. Push your assumptions and push your boundaries and see, is it true what I actually believe? For example, with clients of mine, I thought it would be difficult when I'm cutting clients' hair, they can't see my hair. How would they think I'm a good hairdresser? Because often I know when I walk into whoever cuts my hair, I would judge them on what their hair looks like. So that was an extra thing for me to get over mentally. But once I'd got over that mentally, I was able to use my skill in looking at their body language, eye contact, connecting with them on their lifestyle, and understanding what, as soon as that client walks into the door, we're kind of trained to understand what it is they do, what it is that they like, and you connect, and they actually totally like you as a person, as opposed to you're looking at your physical appearance. So it's kind of more how you influence them on that level, and they at first they might have that little inhibition that, oh, when did you qualify, or how did you get into this? But often it's more kind of inquisitiveness, unawareness, and once you bring that awareness, you're not only doing their hair, but you're actually bringing more awareness to Islam. It's amazing what you can do.
That's really an excellent point, actually. I didn't, you know, when you said that when they walk in and you're trained to see a lot more than, you know, what just your job is to cut their hair, that's really interesting, because I've never really looked at it from that point of view. But also what you were saying about it being in your head and you pushing your boundaries, I agree with that, because even in my work and in my career, I've always noticed that when you're straight with someone from the start, or when you lay down your rules and your boundaries right from the start, people tend to respect that, and then they know, you know, what your framework is and how you know, how to accommodate you within that framework. So I think that you shouldn't inhibit yourself and put those barriers in your own way. Sometimes it's just in our head, and actually if we try, we can actually get a lot further.
I think what's interesting about what you just said is actually how you said you take in mind their body language, what they do, you try to find out a lot about them, and what you're doing is actually getting past the physical appearance, like you said. In actual fact, that's kind of the real customer experience, isn't it? That you're going out of your way to find out about them, about what they do, and it's not just the, okay, what kind of haircut do you want? You know, it's the really getting to know each other, and that is, I think, especially with hairdressing, the chatting and that kind of relaxed atmosphere in the salon is what people partly go for as well. I wanted to ask you, hairdressing, I guess, isn't generally a profession that a Muslim woman would necessarily go into or pursue. Did you find that a challenge in your own community?
I wouldn't say it was so much of a challenge, because it's always something that there's a huge niche for it in our community, because actually you're right, people don't go into it, because there aren't many hairdressers that cater for Muslim women. But that was something that drove me even more to do it. The only challenge I think in our communities that could possibly exist is that cultural barrier, where people often sideline careers or professions that don't involve like academic routes. So if it doesn't involve getting a degree, or it doesn't involve doing some kind of business or medical degree or going into that profession, like something like hairdressing or being a beautician is seen as a side thing and not as like a full-blown career. And I can see where that's coming from, because in England maybe in the past there was a perception that there weren't many opportunities for Muslim women. That's why in our community it's seen that way. But I think it's time that people came to realise that the times have changed, and people are more accommodating within, you know, UK and in Europe. People are more accommodating, and hairdressing can be a full-blown career if somebody really wants it to be. Of course, in my situation, I found that out by taking it as a side career to begin with. So, but I can see totally, if I put my heart and soul into it, I can make it into a very direct career for myself.
Tell us how you changed from working in a salon then now being a mobile hairdresser, and what are, how do you find the differences, and how do you like your new kind of route?
I think the main difference is flexibility. When you're working in a salon, the hours can be quite long, something like 8:30 to 6, or sometimes you can do late nights up till 8, because a lot of people work, and then obviously they like to get their hair done after work. So there is that flexibility. With mobile hairdressing, it's more personal. You go to the person's house, you can actually pick up a lot more in terms of what that person is about. And because you're actually doing that, they feel the experience is more personable. So they enjoy that a little bit more. And you find it a little bit more satisfying, because what you're doing is you're kind of working really hard to build up your own client base. You're working really hard to get known, to let your work speak for itself. And it's very rewarding when you get those referrals from your customers that you've built up yourself, which actually happens in a salon itself when people ask for you. But it's busy in a salon, and sometimes with mobile hairdressing there is the negative where you miss that buzz because you are on your own and you don't get the buzz of learning from everybody else and mixing with the same knowledge, so it's different.
And are your clients mainly Muslim clients now that you're mobile hairdressing? Is it kind of through the community, word of mouth, or do you have a lot of non-Muslim clients and people who you used to cut hair for in the salon?
I do have some non-Muslim clients that I used to cut hair before, and they've kind of requested for me to cut their hair again, which is something quite positive. But I am trying to build up my Muslim clients a lot more, because I can see that there's a real need for it in our community. And one of the main reasons I did go into it, my main intention was to help the community in that way, because I really feel that we struggle when it comes to women's needs like that, and I don't think it should be a barrier for anyone.
You mentioned earlier that you actually declined offers from other sort of well-known high street salons because of various reasons. What reasons were those?
The reasons were, firstly, to do with when you are training as a hairdresser, when you get employed, when you go up the ladder, when you are learning, you have to first start at the bottom as a hairdresser. And it's just like everything else, you have to start at the bottom and you have to work your way up. And when you are starting off at the bottom, you don't often get the opportunity. You can try to, but you don't have to get an opportunity to kind of choose whether or not you want to cut men's hair or ladies' hair. You can when you're experienced and you're up there. So if you do go in with a position where you are experienced as a stylist, you might have that option. But with the very top-end salons, you often, unless you have 10 to 15 years experience or a bit more, you can't go in at those positions. So they will start you up a bit lower and train you up in the way that they want you to be trained up, which is their brand image. So if you get, say, going to Toni & Guy or Charles Worthington, then you'll notice a different cut when you come out of both of those. And that's the way they'll train you for their cuts. So when you are training at the beginning, you will need to learn how to cut men and women's hair, and that is a little bit of a challenge, because even though they are so understanding and they will say, okay, if you want, you can bring in your own male clients that are mahram to you. Unfortunately, there's not really enough to go around, and you really need to get that exposure and experience, and it doesn't really help when you are doing that. And I don't think it's their fault, because it's not profitable for them. If you think about it, if you have a column as a hairdresser, as a stylist, it's not profitable for them to just, if a man comes in and books in that column, for you to then constantly transfer the men over. It's not really their fault, if they are a unisex salon. So that's the reason why I would have declined offers, because I feel like, it's haram money at the end of the day. You don't want to be doing something that's wrong.
I heard a lecture once from Sheikh Osama, who said that when he was in Canada, one of his dear friends, I think from Iran, who is an Ayatollah himself, had come to visit or give lectures in Canada, so he decided to show him around a little bit. And I think they were walking down a high street and he saw a salon and he said, astaghfirullah. And Sheikh Osama said, well, what's wrong? And he said, oh, that man, he's cutting the lady's hair. And Sheikh Osama was like, well, that happens all the time, that's quite normal. I think we get desensitized to these things, don't we? Because we live in this society, and it is very normal for you to walk down a high street and see a man cutting a woman's hair or vice versa. But it's interesting that you've made that point, and I think we should remind ourselves that no, this is not normal, and we shouldn't get desensitized to these things, I think, even when we see them.
Where do you see yourself in 10 years' time?
10 years' time. Inshallah, I see myself being a lot more experienced in hairdressing. Inshallah, I see myself with a lot more, a bigger client base. And at the same time, I would like to keep, one thing about hairdressing is you can keep that creative skill going, but because you've been through the academic route, you use your mind quite a lot when you do go through that. You miss that part as well, so you need to fulfill that. So inshallah, I do see myself having something on the part-time side of things, as in marketing or something like that, in finance or marketing on the side, where I can kind of stimulate my mind and as well as my creative side of things.
Do you see yourself going back into one of these high street salons and maybe going for one of these brand names once you've had that experience, so that you can then dictate who your client base is?
That it could definitely be a possibility, inshallah. Or if not, then if I find a nice women's salon, which unfortunately I haven't seen many around, which is one of my huge passions. I would love to, inshallah, if that could happen, my dream would be to build my own, or have my own women's salon. That would be amazing.
Excellent, inshallah.
That would use both sides, the business and the hairdressing.
Do you ever miss you said you did a degree in, was it marketing?
Yeah.
Do you ever miss that kind of just being in a kind of an office environment and sticking solely to the professional side, or the less kind of hands-on side of work?
I don't actually, because I am a very hands-on person. So what was happening is to sit in an office for me was actually quite frustrating. So if I was doing something, I would do something in event management where I was kind of hands-on and I was organising things. So it's not actually me to be sitting in an office. So hairdressing works well with that aspect. It's just that mental stimulation when you work with numbers or when you're writing articles or things like that I do miss.
I think it's good for us to showcase, different types of careers and different types of paths that, people can take in the community, because I think sometimes we tend to get too focused, and you mentioned that earlier, on the academic side of things and on the office-based or the professional-based or the medical type careers. But it's nice to see that there are other things out there that you can do and that you enjoy, and I think that we shouldn't necessarily restrict our youth to going down one path just because that's what we want, or their parents want, or their parents think are good for them. But I think that it's nice to be able to explore your creative side.
I know that's something that schools are actually doing more these days. I'm not sure if you kind of experience this as well, but for children who aren't necessarily so keen on the academic side of things, they are able to, I think it's 1 or 2 lessons every 2 weeks, and go out and get experience in hairdressing salons, or on a building site, or something that's a little bit more manual, I guess, and working with your hands. And I think that's a really nice idea, and I'm assuming, I think, just from my experience as having been a teacher before, that's quite difficult for, I guess, the Muslim community to understand, because the focus is very much on going into the academic side of things. But clearly, it's changing if schools are encouraging that and telling you that you can have a balance, you can be in lessons and you can also go out to do hairdressing as well.
I always say that I have a personal interest in analysing people and anthropology and things like that. So I always say that when a child is born, it's important to see that child for who it is, or he or she is. What is their personality? What is it? How does their mind actually function? And you can't actually be channeling that child towards something where their mind doesn't actually prefer that. And maybe they would be actually very good at what they do if they choose to do it. So it's you're right. It is about being open-minded and about seeing that individual and seeing what their needs are.
Tell us any interesting stories that, in conversations that you might have had with your clients, especially, considering that they might not necessarily have had a lot of interaction with Muslims. Did you ever get any amusing questions? Or?
I have had some amazing conversations, as you can imagine, ranging from, do you take your hijab off at home?
I've had that.
How do you have a shower? Things like that. But you know, they're really innocent questions. No one should ever take offense to those questions, because they are really genuinely unsure. They're not aware of what we do. And when you kind of give them that awareness and you tell them, okay, this is what I do, this is a day in the life of me, and that's what I do. While I'm cutting their hair, I tell them what I do in my life, I tell them about my family, I get very personal with them, and they kind of warm up to that, that I am actually just like them. And I find, you know, that's when they start connecting. So one of my clients, well, she's a good client of mine, and the first time she met me, she was like, oh, how come you're doing this? You don't show your hair. Why did you go into this? Don't you believe it's right to cover your hair? And that was a really interesting conversation, because intelligently she asked me, if you believe in covering your hair and being modest, why are you dressing us up? Which is such a good question.
It is a good question.
And I explained to her, I said, look, I believe in my religion, which is Islam. And I told her about my religion. I told her about the concepts of hijab and modesty and how it's a state of being. And I said that in Islam, it's not about forcing that religion on other people. You have to make that choice for yourself. Now I feel that by doing this job, I'm actually helping that cause, because I'm raising awareness that not only we're not, like, as people might see, oppressed, or we can do whatever we want in our hijab. And like you're kind of assuming I might not be able to do the hairdressing, look, I am doing it, and I'm doing your hair quite well. So, you know, you've now changed your perception of a lady that observes hijab. And for me, that's an achievement in itself. And at the same time, you might then go away and start thinking a bit more about your modesty, about what it means to you. And when I'm talking to you about the media and how women are portrayed and how the pressure is put on women to look a certain way, you might then go away and say, oh, why did I get my hair cut in that way? What is it? It's kind of like a cycle of invoking a thought process in people, and that's the way I see it. So I don't really see it as me going out there and dressing you up, although that's the actual exterior service of what I'm doing. It's actually more a deep-rooted thing.
Wow, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
So she was very, very, like, you know, intrigued by it, and she wanted to know so much more about, like, my lifestyle, about Islam. And, you know, it's so interesting, because that client now would like to come to my home and see how I live. And you know, it's kind of like, it's amazing that you don't think people are going to respond that way, but they do.
It's a form of dawah or tabligh, really, isn't it? And I really firmly believe that we should all, whatever career path we choose, we should try and excel, you know, and be the best that we can in that career, so that, you know, we can showcase what we're capable of. Because, you know, unfortunately, you hear all sorts of things in the media, but one of the things that I heard which really upset me was that, well, what has the Muslim world contributed in the last 500 years? You know, what have they given us? And we have there's an exhibition at the Science Museum at the moment called 1001 Inventions from the Muslim World. But I'm sure they're all from, you know, hundreds of years ago. And I think that, you know, we really should now show what we are capable of, and that we can excel in every field, and women can as well as men. So I think it's great what you're doing and how you see it, and also how you portray it to your clients. So it's really excellent.
I completely agree. I think being successful in whatever field you're in is actually a must for all women, you know. It doesn't matter what you're doing, absolutely, because I see that as part of our duty to actually show people that we are strong, intelligent, and women who can also be observing their faith as well, and that's obviously completely 100% possible. I just if you could just wrap up for us some advice for people who are looking into going into this profession and are probably in a similar situation at home.
Firstly, I think when you are looking into it, you have to look at how you want to be trained up. That's the main thing, because the way that you get trained up is going to determine how far you're going to go in your career. And you can either go to college, or you can either be trained up at a high street salon, a good salon. Now, the disadvantage of being trained up in the salon is you might have that problem where you will have to cut men's hair. Now, obviously, that's not ideal. So if you go through the college route, often you can get away with it because you can choose your clients. So you can bring in mahram clients to train on, which is what I did. And also check with the college before you go through that process when you are applying. Don't be afraid to ask, am I going to have male teachers? Because when you have male teachers, it sometimes can affect, you know, how you are trained. Maybe they will, you know, they're like, because when you are in a class, when I was in my class training, I removed my hijab because it was a class of girls, and it was good because when you are training, you're supposed to work on each other. So if you have a male teacher, you can't do that in the class, and that restricts you, and therefore you can't learn as well.
Okay.
So it's important for that. And secondly, it's really important that you check with the college that it's okay for you to bring in your own male clients. Thirdly, when you're finished and you're qualified, inshallah, then really do your research. Go to the high street chains. Don't leave them out. Check if you can kind of join them at a stage where you don't have to cut men's hair, because sometimes when you do the trade test, you can actually do that. It depends on how good you are. And lastly, don't give up and do whatever you feel you want to do in your heart, and that's the best advice I can give.
Very good advice.
Thank you very much for coming onto the show as well.
It's a pleasure.
Now it's time for us to go for a quick break, and after the break we'll have our resident life coach, Sister Sidra Zaidi, and we'll have Book of the Week as well, so see you shortly.
Personally, I think it's in the mind. I think if you see yourself as looking odd, then you will kind of reflect that on other people, and you will kind of, your body language will give off that signal. So they will kind of see you as a little bit odd as well. Whereas if you just totally are so natural in your own environment, it kind of rubs off on other people. And I find that it's to do with how you hold yourself. And if you're kind of oozing with confidence in what you're doing, that confidence is kind of filtered into other people, including your clients. So yes, it's a challenge if you have it in your head, but if you don't, there's no challenge.
And did you consciously choose to work in a mainstream high street salon, or because many people have the option, for example, to be a mobile hairdresser and just work from home or visit other people's houses? Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to part 2 of Morning Break. We really hope you've enjoyed the show so far, and stay tuned because we still have lots to come.
Now it's time to introduce our guest. We have with us today Sister Masuma, who is a qualified hairdresser and worked in a high street salon. She's now a mobile hairdresser. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Masuma. Welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about how you got into hairdressing.
Well, I think it's always been an innate passion of mine since I was like 6. So I've always, like, as children do, like playing with your doll's hairs and things like that. But I had an
houses. So what made you choose to actually work in a salon that's just based in a high street that's open to everyone?
Well, I think that the best way to bring out the best skills in yourself is to be in that environment where you have the most exposure. And you don't get that as much with mobile hairdressing. You have to build up your client base at first, and especially if you've just qualified or you're training, it's best to be in that environment where you're with other people that have more experience. You can learn from them. You've got guidance around you, and that's the main reason for working in the salon, which is what I did at the beginning. And it was fantastic, just the amount that you learn in one day, where you have a column of clients, like 5 or 6 clients. You learn something from each client. And you can't really get that with mobile hairdressing. I mean, if you're running around in your car, you can't really fit in 6 people a day if you're going to different places in London. So it is a different environment altogether, and everything's local to you. Your products are just there. You can recommend your products. You can do this with your sales, all the same thing. And it's kind of it's that also that buzz of working with people in the same industry as you is totally different.
It sounds really exciting, actually. I really can see the passion coming through in your speech, even. I wanted to ask you, did you ever face challenges in terms of when you went to meet employers? So before you got employed with the salon, did they look at you funny and say, "Well, we can't even see your hair," so or did your customers have reactions to you?
Before I went into this, I thought, could my hijab be a slight excessive passion of it? And as I grew up, when anyone asked me when I was younger, I said, "What do you want to be?" I said, "I definitely want to be a hairdresser." But I think the thing is that with the academics and things like that, I kind of went into the academic side of things more. I felt more stimulated by all that. So I went ahead, I did my degree, I worked as a marketing executive in London. And then after I got married, I realised that passion was still within me. And I said, if I don't do this, I will never know what it's really like. So alhamdulillah, with the support of my husband, I was able to go forward and qualify in this. And that's how I really got into it.
So you must find it a bit strange, you know, obviously being veiled and covered and working in a high street salon where absolutely anybody can walk in. Did you find that a bit of a challenge?